Hello, friends. Today we start a series of our episodes, which will be focusing on strategy. You probably wonder why strategy. I believe that over the past many years of my experience, both in business as well as a consultant, strategy is the most misunderstood and misused term. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying that in over 80 to 85% of the organizations that I have dealt with, more often than not, all of them have a plan which they say is their strategy. And this is not true. Okay, strategy is something that is very different. And that is why I have picked up this topic, on which I'm going to talk for maybe 3 or 4 sessions, definitely all of this week, on what is strategy and how does one build a strategy. So let's delve right into it and see what strategy is and how does one work on it. Strategy is making decisions and setting goals. Okay, making decisions and setting goals based on various elements. What is the data available to you? What are your capabilities? You can't have a strategy where, oh, well, you can have a strategy where you don't have the capabilities right now, but then that strategy has to contain a plan for developing those capabilities. Often strategy uses intuition, and always strategy needs logic. So strategy is a combination of your mission, of your vision, of the purpose for being in business. And this has to be developed taking into account the customers, what they require, and whether you're capable of delivering that. So basically your capabilities, and whether you have the requisite resources in terms of partners, collaborators, and everybody else who you need to execute the strategy that you are going to make. The strategy should always encompass all the stakeholders in your business. Okay? And it should always look and be specific to the category you are in, the business category you are in, and what is the competition around you. Only then can you set a strategy which is going to help you, because the basic fundamental of strategy is to have continuous success and, very importantly, to create value for the organization. And that's what we need to really think about and remember, that you need to create value at the end of the day. So strategy typically will look at long-term scenarios and identify the variables that are there within your space, within the space you are functioning in, and consider what would happen if one or more of those variables change, and have a plan drafted out in advance so that you can react fast when that variable does change. Okay? And therefore, naturally, when I'm saying you need to be able to adapt, strategy has to be nimble. The minute some variables change, especially if they're changing for good, your strategy will need to change. So your strategy needs to be nimble. Your strategy needs to be adaptable. Okay, and this will depend on the business you are in, which part of the globe you are in, okay, and what are the consumer shifts which you definitely cannot predict with a high level of accuracy at any stage of your operations. So strategy is something that is very, very forward-thinking and that looks at multiple options of how you will address the challenges. Now, when you're building a strategy, you will also need to figure out how you're going to those goals. How are you going to achieve them? How are you going to achieve the strategic goals that you have set from within your strategy? And for this, you need a plan. So a plan is actually a part of the strategy. And a plan is basically a process flow. Okay, after A comes B, B, C. If C, then D. If not C, then E. It's a process flow, and which is basically a flow chart to achieve the goals. Okay, so a plan is essentially about operations. How are you going to go and reach that goal? And how your strategy is going to get achieved. Your process flow will actually change when variables change. And to that extent, your plan also needs to be nimble. But by and large, your plan needs to be something that is fixed, and that is something that you are going to follow on a day-to-day basis. It's a roadmap for you to reach your goal. So strategy includes a plan, and be clear, a plan and operation is not a strategy. As I said, more than 80 or 85% of the organizations that I have worked with consider a plan a strategy. No. And just setting a plan without having a strategy is not a great idea, because there's no long-term vision that your company is following. I'll give you an example of why I say 80 to 85% of the organizations I work with do not know the difference between strategy and planning. I have done quite a few offsites for various companies. Well, more than 3 years back, because of certain challenges for the last 3 years, I haven't done too many of them. But whenever these offsites were made, more often than not, the company used to term the offsite as a strategic offsite with senior leaders of the organization. Okay, but at the end of the day, what I noticed is that they were more interested in talking about the planning and the processes and what are the challenges in various aspects of operations rather than looking at a strategy. A strategy needs to look at the what ifs. It needs to look at the if-thens, which a process doesn't always need to look at. So if these what ifs and if-thens are not discussed, it remains a planning offsite rather than a strategy development offsite. Okay. So having said this, let us quickly look at what is the difference between a plan and a strategy. Okay. So the first difference is with the purpose and the scope. The strategy that you develop is long-term and directional. It is meant to take you to some place that you have envisioned for your organization. Whereas a plan is very detailed and it is operational. It is not a visionary. Okay, it's an operational. Yes, there are certain things you will need to visualize when you're setting up operations also, but it's not like a strategy with talking of the whole organization reaching a different level altogether. As far as flexibility and adaptation is concerned, the strategy, as I said, needs to be flexible, nimble, and adaptable, because variables will change. There is nothing in today's world that remains constant for long. And as you probably heard it many times before, the only thing that is constant in the world is change. So while a strategy needs to be flexible, nimble, and adaptable, a plan, in contrast, is usually rigid. It is very structured and it is fixed. You don't give the people who are operating a system the flexibility to do it as they want. as far as the focus is concerned and the competitiveness is concerned, the strategy focuses on external parameters, on variables that are outside of the organization, more within the space that you are operating. Whereas the plan is internally focused, depending on your capabilities, depending on the resources available to you, and depending on how fast and well you can execute a plan to follow that strategy. And as I said, as far as planning is concerned, a strategy is normally a very long-term plan, which is changeable if the variables change. Whereas a plan is generally short-term, in the sense that, okay, we are going to do this, and this will help us to reach there, but you are going to follow milestones. And as you achieve milestones, your plan is going to change. So it's a very short term. Your strategy doesn't change for a very long time. Yes, it gets adapted when changes happen in the variables. So some things that you need to remember about strategy. Strategy cannot exist in a vacuum. You need to analyze and validate your goals. You have to be sure they're the right ones, and your aspirations, and set a strategy to achieve those goals and aspirations. You need to study from other organizations why they failed, okay, to achieve goals similar to what you've done, and whether you can address those things that made them fail so that your strategy works. Always strategy needs to look at the resources and capabilities. Only then can you make a plan, which is a part of the strategy and which will help you to reach your goal. Okay, so you need to check the resources and capabilities. And if you don't have them, you need to be sure that you have a way and a plan on how you will acquire or develop those resources that will be needed. So all these pointers put together will help you to create a strategy. Okay. And as I said, there are multiple ways in you will acquire the resources and capabilities required. We'll look at it at a later date. Okay. Another thing too important is that no matter how good your strategy is, if the leader of the organization, leaders of the organization, whether it is the board of directors, whether it is the CEO, if they do not believe in the strategy, and if they're unsure, and something I notice very often, if they're impatient, they don't give you enough time to process, okay, a strategy will fail. Because no solution comes as fast as one would want it to. It's going to take a finite amount of time, and you have to give it that time. As I keep saying very often, giving me 3 wives is not going to give me a child in 3 months. It will give me 3 children in 9 months. So you have to be patient. You have to give it the required time. And in today's times, where everything everybody wants is in a flash, it's very difficult to achieve this. So you need to set up your organization to be quick in responding to changes and making sure that they can tweak the processes as required. You need not just be reactive, because that reactive solutions are very short-term solutions and do not always give great results. But if you have a planned strategy of how you will do things, as we just discussed a few minutes earlier, how you will do things when the variables change, then you're not being reactive because you have planned. Yes, that plan might need tweaking because it might not have changed 100% in the way you're looking at it. So it might need tweaking, but that's the essential part, that you have thought about it from before. And remember the GIGO principle. I'm sure most of you know about it, is garbage in, garbage out. Why am I saying this about strategy? Because if your strategy is not well defined and if it is not thought of, then a workable plan is not possible. Because you're setting in garbage in this as a part of the strategy, you're going to get garbage out. Okay, so ensure to avoid this, to avoid the GIGO effect, ensure that you have a well-documented analysis of your this thing, of your strategy and a listed document of the variables that will come into play for you to achieve your strategy. And then, as I said, against each of those variables, do the what ifs and the if thens. Okay, so what are the variables? Just to give you a top of the line, this thing, some of them are internal variables, whether you have the resources, whether you have the teams that you require to do it, whether you as an organization have the core capabilities, competencies, and external resources like the economic atmosphere, the social atmosphere, the political atmosphere. All of this will affect your strategy. So this is what strategy is all about. In the next session, we are going to continue talking about strategy and also start delving into how one would build a strategy and then execute it. So to sum up, a strategy needs to be flexible. It needs to be clear. It needs to be focused. It needs to be agile. It needs to be resourceful. It needs to be inclusive of innovation. Any company that does not innovate is going to perish. And even if you don't innovate, you have to embrace innovation. And hence your strategy should be able to do that. Your strategy needs to be risk aware. You have to consider what are the risks that can possibly come up and have pre-thought on solutions for that. And it has to be well defined. As I said, you need to define your strategy. You need to define the variables. You need to list down the what ifs and the if thens so that your strategy becomes something that is interesting. There's some myths about strategy. People say strategy cannot be changed. So, as I just said, it doesn't change as a vision, but it needs to be tweaked depending on how variables change. So saying that strategy does not change is wrong. I've heard a lot of people who say that disruptions force an organization to change its strategy. Now, really speaking, from what we just said, this cannot be true. Because when you're looking at variables, one of the variables you will look at is how your business model can be disrupted. And therefore, you've already done the what ifs and the if thens for that. And therefore, your strategy is going to adapt and not change. And lots of times people say, especially looking at the big tech things, like people like Amazon and all, that competitive advantage is dead. Far from it. Competitive advantage is created by you as an organization, depending on how you can innovate, depending on how you can create absolutely exceptional product features, and how you can give offers and create a distinct competitive advantage for your customers. Okay. A lot of people tell me that, why do I need a strategy? I'm so agile that I can react at any time. Yes, very good. That's an excellent trait. But if you don't have a strategy, what is your goal? Where do you want to be 20 years down the line? What is your organization about? Why does it exist? Why does your product exist? Where do you want to go with it? For whom do you develop the product? All this is not known to you by being just agile. Okay. And a lot of times, oh, I don't need to worry about strategy. I have my digital strategy in place. Trust me, a digital strategy is not a strategy. It's a part of the plan on how you're going to promote, how you're going to be viewed by the customers. And it's digital strategy. It's not a strategy. It's a part of the plan for executing the bigger strategy. So I think I'm going to stop this session now and we'll look at it the next time. So basically, strategy plays a very crucial role in guiding the firm's growth, the firm's competitiveness, and therefore the firm's success. It also, because a plan is a part of the strategy, it offers a roadmap And that roadmap will help in decision making. It will help in resource providing. It will help in adaptation to changing variables, and it will transform circumstances under which you operate. So you need to make sure that your firm stays agile, it stays focused, and it is well prepared to achieve goals successfully. This is what strategy is all about. See you day after tomorrow. We're going to continue this topic, and I hope you enjoyed this session. Look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you very much.